The food in England, there's a lot of good food, but there's also a lot of very mediocre food. One of the classic meals you go over and they'd have like their Sunday roast. And so it consists of usually having your meat, you have roasted parsnips, you have roasted potatoes as well as mashed potatoes, usually you have carrots, peas, and specifically in Manchester in the north of England, they have what's known as Yorkshire puddings. Now Yorkshire puddings, it's kind of like a bread, it's almost like a small bowl that's like a fried bread. And they're really, really good. You usually put like a little bit of food in it or potatoes in it. And then English people love gravy. And so you're going to put gravy over absolutely everything, over the meat, over all your vegetables, over the Yorkshire pudding. They really, really love that. Some of the classic English desserts, you get things like a trifle. A trifle is where you have some kind of like bread substance at the bottom. It could be like a sponge cake. I've seen people do it with like an angel food cake type of substance. And then there's usually like a layer of jello, and then also like a layer of, and then by the way, in England they don't call it jello, they call it jelly. So if they talk about jelly, they're talking about the jello. And then on top they usually have kind of a creamy substance. Sometimes it's kind of like a yogurt type of substance, but it's more creamy. And trifles are really, really good. Another common thing that you'll see is if you have other desserts, a lot of times they'll put either custard or cream on top. The custard is kind of like almost like a vanilla-y flavor a little bit, but it's not. It's really good though. But they'll put it like on apple pie, or they'll put it on any kind of dessert you can think of. And then cream is really, really good on fruit and other types of foods. And so a lot of times after like a classic English meal, they'll bring out a dessert, and they'll pour the cream on top of it. Even if it's like a cake or if it's like a brownie type of dish, they'll a lot of times put cream on top of it. Some of the other classic English meals are also fish and chips. Most corners will have like a fish and chip shop, and they'll wrap it up in the newspaper, and they have the chips, and they'll have gravy available for you if you want to put on the chips, or they'll have, and chips of course are what we refer to here is almost like French fries. Or what they'll do is a lot of times they'll have like a curry sauce, so they'll actually pour curry sauce on top of the chips, or you can dip the chips into curry sauce. So that was a favorite of mine, is having with curry sauce instead of ketchup. So they'll get the big battered fish, and they'll pour a lot of salt on it and lots of vinegar on it, and it's awesome. If you find a good fish and chip shop, some are not as good as others, but most of them are awesome. Something else that's really common to a lot of the English communities is curry shops. And so the English people love curry food. I'd say curry, Indian food or curry is to England what Mexican food is to us. We have a lot of like Mexican type places, that we love to go and get that. It's kind of the same for England. It's a huge staple for them. They love going out to like the curry shops and getting curry. And a lot of people, have curry quite often. I know a lot of families that would have curry like once a week or once every 2 weeks. Whereas here in America, it's not as common for us to cook, as many curries. One of the other things I love about England is it has such a diverse culture. So you have people from all over the world. You have people from China, you have people from all over Africa, all over Europe. You don't get as many people that are from South America. But with this rich expanse and diversity of cultures, you also have the opportunity to try a lot of different types of food. And so some of the things, there are things that I loved that I got to try from a lot of cultures. If I met people from the Caribbean, they'd usually make rice and peas, which is rice with kidney beans. And they'd also make like a jerk chicken, which is really, really good, and fried plantain, which I'd strongly recommend. I also tried pig's feet from a friend who was from Zimbabwe. I wouldn't try that again. I tried chicken feet from some friends in China. I wouldn't try that again. Tried oxtail from some other friends in Africa. I've had whole fish, with a lot of friends from Africa, and you eat it with just your fingers, and a lot of times you'll have it like a fufu if they're from Nigeria, or you have it with like a sadza iwisi if they're from the south of Africa, such as Zimbabwe. And so a lot of like the African dishes specifically, you'll eat with your hands, and so you'll get like a little bit of this doughy substance, and get some of the rice or get some of the vegetables, and you'll eat it with your hands. You kind of got to get used to that a little bit. So English breakfasts are very different from American breakfasts. English breakfasts consist of lots of fried foods, and so you'll have fried tomatoes, fried mushrooms, you'll have a couple sausages, you'll have bacon, you'll have fried eggs, Sometimes they'll do fried toast, which is where they literally fry it in oil. Baked beans is a huge staple in England. You'll have baked beans with your breakfast. Also, a lot of people have baked beans like for a lot of meals, and so expect to eat a lot more baked beans while you're over there. As well as also, they also have what's known as blood pudding, or blood sausage is sometimes what they call it. And so a lot of people will have that with breakfast, and what it is it's coagulated, I think it's coagulated sheep's blood that they put into a patty and then they fry it up. So I don't know if I'd recommend it, but that's something that you'll see. And so if you see kind of the black looking sausage thing, it's just fried blood. Not my favorite. Other things for breakfast, they'll usually have some kind of potato, some kind of potato to have with breakfast, but their breakfasts are really, really big and really, really filling as well, because there's just all these foods. And kind of the idea behind like having so many different foods is that everything on your plate can go with something else. So quite often I take get the tomato and have it with the egg, or take the beans and put the beans on the toast and eat it like that. So foods aren't really meant to be eaten plain with the English breakfast. You're meant to kind of mix and match different combinations with each other, and try that out. From an American standpoint, going to England, there's a few changes that were quite apparent. One of the things is that the England roads are a lot more narrow, and so there's a lot of roads that you can't actually fit two cars driving down on the same street. And so it's quite common for cars to pull up on the curb to allow another car to pass, and then to pull off of the curb. Another thing is that England, if they're trying to signal someone to go, they frequently flash their lights. So in America, if someone's flashing their lights at you, usually we view it as a bad thing. Usually they're angry with you. But in England, if someone does a quick flash of their lights, it's kind of like a go ahead, or sorry about that, or it's a positive thing if someone gives you a quick flash of their light. Most of the cars are very small and very compact, generally, so that they can ride on the roads. Whereas a normal road here, that you drive through in a neighborhood is usually like the main road on a busy street in Manchester or elsewhere. And so roads are definitely more narrow, and that's something that kind of changes how you drive. Of course, something that most people know is that you drive on the left side of the road instead of the right side of the road. And so that takes a little bit of getting used to, is the idea that, the whole left turn, and there's a lot more roundabouts as well. And so that took a little bit of time to adjust to, is getting used to, okay, if you're in this lane on the roundabout, where do you get off? And that type of thing. And so I got a driver's license while I was in England, and I had to do some driving classes to be sure that I had the roundabouts down and the driving on the left down. And so that was kind of a cool experience. You can actually use your American license to drive in England for up to a year, but after that point in time, you do need to get an English license. And so I have one that's good till 2060, and so that's kind of a cool little factoid. A lot of the places in England, a lot of the homes are, it's known as terrace housing. And so instead of having kind of distinct houses with their yard, a lot of the homes are all connected. So there'll be this row of houses, that all of them look identical to, and the only thing basically disconnect, makes one house look different from another house is if it's painted a different color. In which case, there's just a line where you can see where it's one color to the next color. And that's kind of separates out their houses. And that's how a lot of the houses in England are, A lot of them are kind of that style of home where, it's like that, or what it'll be like a duplex where there's, one home connected to another home. And again, there's kind of that split. Most people have small yards that are in the suburbs or in the cities, whereas in America, we usually have a decent sized yard. In England, a lot of times it'll be, it's a small, 5 foot by 8 foot, little yard in the front. And so a lot of times we'll just have rocks. Most people in England I'd say most people don't actually own lawnmowers, because most of them don't actually have yards. English people on a whole are a little bit more, generally more reserved, kind of keep more to themselves. Whereas Americans, we're kind of go and talk to a lot of people. There's a really rich culture of, Anglican or Church of England. That's kind of the nationally recognized England, and the Queen's actually kind of the leader of the Queen of England. She's kind of technically the leader of the church. So a lot of people have that tradition of the Church of England, or also of the Catholic Church. And so a lot of people are christened as babies when they're, into those churches. However, most people never, go to church at all. And so for a lot of people, a lot of people kind of have the idea of God, the concept of God, but the idea of attending church and the idea of religion is sometimes foreign for a lot of people, whether they're English or whether they're from other countries. And there's also a lot of people, recognizing that there's a lot of people from other countries. There's also many Muslims in a lot of the communities. They're coming from the Middle Eastern countries. Socially, there's a lot of different religions represented in England. And there's a lot of really good football clubs in England. So one of the ones that's pretty famous worldwide is Manchester United. And so when I was serving in Manchester, I actually lived probably, a 10-minute walk away from Old Trafford, which is the football stadium that they play at. And so several times on my mission, I actually toured the stadium, which was a lot of fun, and kind of seen like a lot of their history and a lot of their culture. Now, if you're not a Manchester United fan, they also have, Manchester City. Liverpool Football Club's also a big one. They had Ansdale. So there's a lot of these really, fun football clubs, and I definitely recommend, if you get a chance to take a tour. Those are always really, really fun to tour and to see those football stadiums. In Manchester itself, there's a lot of history in regards to the museums, because that's like the cotton industry was huge there. In the 1800s. That's kind of what the missionaries came to when they first arrived, was kind of these factory type settings. It's almost like the setting that, Charles Dickens, that you'd envision in Charles Dickens' book, A Christmas Carol. That's kind of like what a lot of Manchester was like early, in the 1800s when the missionaries arrived, is kind of these bleak settings, a lot of child labor going on, a lot of these problems. And so there's a lot of museums now that kind of commemorate some of those, that industry, and talk a lot about that industry. My favorite part of England, beyond like the specific sites, is the countryside. I love seeing all the gorgeous hills. There's plenty of, different mansions, and there's plenty of different estates that, that are available to go and tour. They're just amazing. One of my favorite things in England is what's known as the Lake District. So the Lake District is the northern portion of England. And it is just these expanses of these really, really gorgeous lakes, such as Lake Windermere. This is where, poets such as Longfellow, spent a lot of their time and actually lived. Or like Beatrice Potter, who wrote like I think it was Peter Rabbit. That's like where a lot of these people spent so much of their time. And it's just this gorgeous, gorgeous countryside. When I've been back over to visit to England, I've actually gone up and spent time hiking through there. It's just so, so beautiful and so gorgeous.